So welcome, Mary Ann Knoll, and congratulations on your KBH Award.
Thank you very much.
Can you provide a brief introduction to yourself and your background as a CPA facilitator?
I went through the legacy designations. So I actually have my CMA, which I got first, worked in industry, the not-for-profit sector. Then I got my CA. So I went the opposite of many people and worked in public practice. And so I actually started facilitating in the old CPAWSB program way back when. In terms of starting with CPA, I was part of the first module, the first core one that happened, and really wanted to be a part of it because I felt like having both designations, I kind of had something to offer. Because all of a sudden, people from very different aspects of accounting, or who had maybe very different motivations and career aspirations, were all coming together in the same program. So I really wanted to be a part of it. So I was a part of it right at the onset and have stayed with it ever since. I've been a part of Core 1, Core 2, Assurance, Capstone 1, Capstone 2, although now I mainly specialize in Core 1, at least the most, so.
What was your experience beginning your job as an accountant? And did that match your initial expectations?
So interestingly enough, I took accounting as a means to an end. I really wanted to be a manager and work in management. And so that's sort of that whole industry not-for-profit sector was, and I just knew that knowing the numbers and being able to work with the financial end of things would really kind of propel my career as a manager. And so that was my, sort of impetus for majoring in accounting and then getting my CMA. And what was interesting is over time, I definitely just gravitated more to that financial side. I found I really enjoyed that's where I really wanted to be, and just sort of tended to gravitate more and more in that direction from a work experience perspective. So I really, kind of had that transition there. And I was actually lucky. So I did my CMA first. And then by the time I did my CA, I actually had a lot of work experience behind me. And that was so valuable because I felt like everything I was doing in my CA, I was applying it right away, constantly. Even when I worked in the not-for-profit sector, I, didn't have my CA at the time, hadn't been in public practice, but really got into things like developing internal controls and things like that, which, helped me later on when I got more into assurance in public practice, right? And so it just, all sort of, I always really encourage, because I also teach in post-secondary and then I work with candidates. One of the things I always try and encourage them is just the doors and experiences that your CPA can open, right? And that it doesn't have to there's so many different opportunities. It doesn't have to look the same as everyone else's, work experience, opportunities, things like that.
Absolutely. You want to take a summer off? Great. You want to do them back to back to back to back to back? Have at her.
Well, one of the reasons my CA, just to share a little personal experience, was actually a little more difficult is I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to have a second child because maternity leave, that would be a great time to kill a couple modules. Boy, was I wrong. But, you learn from your mistakes.
You had a plan. You went with it and then you adjusted, and that's
exactly. So there definitely is flexibility because I definitely ended up taking a year off from the modules.
And it's absolutely like A-okay. I had a candidate, young family, and he took one module a year.
Yeah.
Great. So what advice do you have to either aspiring or current facilitators that really want to level up their skill set and how they're facilitating their candidates?
I think for people who are already facilitating, if I could go back and sort of give myself some advice, a few things is, especially with online facilitation, somehow let yourself come across in it. Be yourself and try and show that to candidates. I do that way more now than I used to, and it helps me interact, I think, better with candidates. It helps them to get to know me, feel familiar with me, and I think that candidates are then more forthcoming as well. The other thing is, and this is sometimes hard, CPA PEP comes with a lot of resources, but the more you get to know those resources, so you can help point them out to candidates, or if candidates are struggling with the resources, being able to help them with them a little bit, give them some advice with them. The more you can get to know those resources, I think the better. And just having that realization that, the candidates on the other end have their own way of learning, their own way of using the information and things like that.
Do you ever get any opportunities to collaborate with other CPA PEP educators? And what does that look like?
So I do in a couple of fashions. First of all, I work in a post-secondary institution where several of us actually facilitator session lead. So that's excellent. Literally, I can walk 5 feet. If the person sees this, they're not going to know who I'm talking about, across my hallway and talk to someone else who's also doing it. And so that's great. But there's a number of us. And so, if we're having coffee at work or just, things like that, or after a meeting at work, sometimes we chat about it. And that's really nice to have, right? Because for me, it's very easy to access other people who are involved with it. Then because I do session leading, not so much now because I've been doing more of the virtual since COVID, but before, obviously when we were all getting together, and now a little bit more of that again, that actually really helps as well, because you're often in locations where there might be several sessions going on. And so you get to talk to other people who are involved in session leading and facilitating. So through both of those, I've been able to do so as well. So
circling back to the candidates, can you share some of the common challenges that candidates face in CPA PEP? And how do you help them overcome these challenges?
Definitely with Core 1, I mean, it's very overwhelming at first, right? And one of the things, I just try and give them tips whenever I can on little things like how to make study notes, how to use the resources. One of the things PEP has done is they've developed a lot of resources for candidates. And so I try to make candidates aware of those, but also try and encourage them to pick and choose. Like it can almost be overwhelming, the number of resources, but I try and stress to candidates that the expectation isn't actually necessarily that they use them all. It's that they find the ones that work for them. Also, if they're feeling overwhelmed, I try and get them to focus on small goals, especially if they're struggling. Like just make one goal for next week, one or two small things that you're going to change up and do differently, right? Our profession attracts a lot of perfectionists. And, candidates often have really high expectations of themselves. And not that I want to say to them, you can lower, but sometimes they just have to hear, like, especially if things are going on in their lives and they share that with me and they're struggling to prioritize PEP because of other things. And sometimes like major events that have happened, sometimes they just need to hear that, you know what? It's okay if PEP can't be your priority right now. I did have a candidate, and this was the first time I'd really had a candidate experience this, where they realized they weren't going to be able to write the module exam for various reasons. And, but it was too late to drop. And they were really struggling. They had so much going on in their lives. And they were like, I don't know what to do. And, I just kind of said, what if you just do what you can? Just get what you can out of it. You paid for it. You get what you can out of it, hand in whatever you can to me, and I'll give you feedback on it, and take what you can out of it, knowing that, yeah, you probably are going to end up having to do this module again, but just get what you can out of it now.
I feel like that's a really good advice for life that I'm going to take away from our talk, because whether it's in a module or a certain season, just do what you can, get what you can out of it. And just because that's what your best looks like this week or this month or this quarter doesn't mean that that's what it looked like before or in the future. So
yeah,
wonderful.
So.
Candidates have diverse learning styles and diverse events that come up in their lives throughout the module. So how do you adapt your facilitation methods to ensure inclusivity and effectiveness?
I try and encourage candidates sometimes to tell me what they need, kind of, especially if they're struggling, but also as we get into the later weeks, if they're doing really well. Like, is there anything more that you'd like me to give you feedback on, things like that? Like, and I do find, which, you know, candidates are busy, I realize that on the other side, so they don't always email back or tell me that, but I try and give them the opportunity at least to tell me that, in case there's things that I could do differently, things like that, or play, you know, different spots. I really encourage them as well as learners to kind of figure out what works for them, because, you know, don't plan to do PEP for 8 hours on a Saturday if you struggle to sit for 8 hours, or don't plan to study for the module exam 3 days straight, 8 hours at a time. You know, I try and encourage them, like, you know, what if you make study notes as you go? And I actually totally got this from another facilitator, right? Can you learn a section on the way to work? Right?
Yeah.
Can you, you know, or like a handbook section, can you learn a handbook section on the way to work in the morning, assuming you're not driving? You know, things like that, like break it into bits and pieces if that's how you learn best, right? Because for some people, there's a lot of material, especially in core 1 and core 2. And so I think candidates sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to set aside these massive amount of times. And even if they can set it aside, which isn't always realistic, that's not always how they learn best either, you know, especially if they're working 5 days during the week as well, right?
Okay, so we talked a bit about your journey. I am interested in, are there any kind of, you know, doors that you see open for CPAs now that might not be intuitive for people coming up in, you know, quote, more traditional ways?
Our role is going to be changing with AI and things like that, but that doesn't have to be a scary thing. That can actually be an opportune, there can be a lot of opportunities there as well. And so, of course, there's, you know, there are roles now in things like data analytics and things like that, that accountants can be, you know, even if it's not accounting information, that accountants, with our knowledge, with our analytical skills, are really sort of able to move into if that's an area that's of interest, right? So I think about things like data analytics, but I also think about, I don't know, like, I just feel like with the skills that you get as a CPA, there's so many different areas that you can move into. You know, even if people want to be more management, people oriented, things like that, even if you go into public practice, like, one of the things there's a need for is managers that have really good people skills and things like that, right? So there's opportunities there. And, you know, we work with clients, we work with colleagues. And so, especially once you have a few years of experience, I always feel like, you know, you're pretty well versed to go into almost any type of management role in any type of job, if you get what I mean. Like, you develop those skills, right? So
Mary Ann, any final thoughts or words of encouragement for individuals on their CPA candidacy journey?
I always tell my candidates when they go into their first core 1 exam, when I write them their final tips, is, you know, if you feel anxious, you feel overwhelmed, just look around you. Most of the other people feel the same way, you know. And I just kind of remind people about that people are in this journey with you. Network with them, get to know them. Actually, I won't say when I did my CMA, it was a long time ago. Probably every second summer, I still get together with 3 other people that I did my CMA with. And so getting to know other candidates who are in this journey with you actually can be really rewarding.